On the final day of May 1982, a horrifying scene unfolded in Cranston, Vermont, a small town known for its tranquil environment and tight-knit community. Cranston's 10,000 residents had never seen anything remotely as chilling as what was about to take place. Nestled among rolling hills and serene countryside, Cranston seemed like the last place such a tragedy could occur. The Harrington family, living on Maplewood Drive, had always been perceived as an ordinary, albeit private, family. Their modest home, tucked away on a quiet, tree-lined street, had seen decades of memories, both joyful and strained. The family comprised Beatrice Harrington, the elderly matriarch, her son Arthur, and Arthur's older brother, William, who was now married with 6 children of his own. To their neighbors, the Harringtons appeared like any other family, but underneath the surface lay tensions that had festered for decades. Arthur Harrington, born on May 17, 1942, had always been a shadow in his family. Chronic asthma and a frail constitution had plagued him since childhood, preventing him from participating in many of the activities that his peers enjoyed. His older brother, William, was the family's golden child, successful, athletic, and admired by everyone. This contrast only deepened Arthur's feelings of inadequacy and alienation. Their mother, Beatrice, made no secret of her favoritism toward William, which further fueled Arthur's resentment. Their father, Samuel, who had passed away years ago, had also been harsh and dismissive toward Arthur, leaving lasting scars. By 1982, Arthur was 40 years old, unemployed, and living with his elderly mother. His days were spent in relative isolation, often brooding over his perceived failures and the constant comparisons to his older brother. William, meanwhile, had built a successful life for himself, complete with a loving wife, Margaret, and 6 children. The stark contrast between the brothers' lives set the stage for what would become one of the most shocking and tragic events in Cranston's history. It was a warm and sunny Sunday on May 30, 1982, when the Harrington family gathered at Beatrice's house for a barbecue. The occasion was meant to celebrate Arthur's upcoming birthday, though the event carried a sense of formality rather than warmth. Beatrice, as always, had gone to great lengths to prepare a feast, while the children played in the backyard. The adults exchanged pleasantries, but beneath the surface, Arthur was seething. Arthur spent most of the day in his upstairs room, avoiding the family festivities. He had been drinking heavily, a habit that had become increasingly common for him over the years. As the laughter and chatter of his family echoed through the house, Arthur's thoughts grew darker. He felt like an outsider in his own home, unappreciated and overshadowed by his successful brother. In his mind, the day's celebration was yet another example of his family's disregard for him. Unknown to anyone, Arthur had been planning something sinister for weeks. He had purchased firearms, including a .38 caliber revolver and a .22 rifle, and practiced shooting at a local range. He had also written notes detailing his grievances against his family, documents that would later be used as evidence of premeditation. These notes painted a picture of a man consumed by bitterness and convinced that his family had conspired against him. Around 3 p.m., Arthur finally emerged from his room, carrying the revolver. His brother William was the first to notice him and greeted him with a casual remark. But Arthur's response was to raise the gun and fire. The shot hit William in the chest, and chaos erupted as the family scrambled to make sense of what was happening. Arthur turned the gun on Margaret next, silencing her screams. One by one, he moved through the house, leaving no one alive. In less than 10 minutes, the Harrington family home was transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. Beatrice, Margaret, and all 6 of William's children lay dead. Arthur's methodical approach left no room for escape. He locked the doors and ensured that no one could intervene. Neighbors later reported hearing faint gunshots and screams, but by the time they realized something was wrong, it was already too late. After completing the massacre, Arthur sat down in the living room amidst the carnage. He poured himself a drink, lit a cigarette, and stared blankly at the blood-soaked walls. He remained in the house for hours, showing no signs of remorse or panic. The once vibrant home, filled with laughter and life, had become eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards under Arthur's pacing. Among the most haunting details of the crime scene was the discovery of the youngest victim, 4-year-old Emily, lying near the couch with her hand outstretched. Clutched in her tiny fingers was a partially unwrapped chocolate bar from the earlier Easter celebrations. This heart-wrenching image would come to symbolize the innocence lost in the Harrington massacre. At 6:47 p.m., Arthur finally picked up the phone and called the police. His voice was unnervingly calm as he said, "I've killed them all. You should come." When officers arrived, they found Arthur sitting on the porch, unarmed and composed. He raised his hands in surrender and offered no resistance as he was taken into custody. Inside the house, the scene was unlike anything the officers had ever encountered. Bodies were scattered across rooms, and blood pooled on the floors. Investigators counted 29 spent cartridges and noted the precision with which Arthur had carried out the killings. Cranston's police chief, Samuel Clayton, described the scene as a bloodbath, while Arthur's demeanor was described as eerie and detached. News of the massacre spread quickly, plunging the small town of Cranston into a state of collective grief and disbelief. The Harrington family had been well known and respected in the community, making the tragedy all the more shocking. The idea that Arthur, the quiet and unassuming younger brother, could commit such an atrocity was difficult for many to comprehend. Neighbors described him as odd but harmless, a man who kept to himself and rarely interacted with others. One neighbor, Martha Greer, recalled, "I would see Arthur sitting on his porch, just staring out into the street. He always seemed like he was in his own world. I never imagined he could do something like this." Another neighbor, Robert Latham, added, "Beatrice adored William. She doted on him and his kids. Arthur always seemed like he was on the outside looking in." As the details of the crime emerged, the town's sense of security was shattered. Beatrice Harrington had been a beloved figure in Cranston, known for her involvement in local charities and her warm demeanor. William and Margaret were similarly well regarded, often seen attending church events and school functions with their children. The sudden loss of an entire family left a void that the community struggled to fill. The media descended on Cranston, turning the Harrington massacre into a national story. Reporters camped outside the crime scene, and news vans lined the quiet streets of Maplewood Drive. The gruesome details of the killings, coupled with Arthur's chilling lack of remorse, made for sensational headlines. For the residents of Cranston, however, the media frenzy only deepened their pain. Many felt that the tragedy was being exploited for entertainment, adding to the community's sense of violation. In the days following the massacre, vigils were held throughout the town. Friends, neighbors, and strangers alike came together to mourn the loss of the Harrington family. Yet, amidst the outpouring of grief, questions lingered. How could this have happened? What had driven Arthur to such an unthinkable act? These questions would haunt Cranston for years to come. Arthur's arrest was uneventful, a stark contrast to the horrifying events that had preceded it. He surrendered to the police without incident, his demeanor calm and almost indifferent. At the station, investigators began the difficult task of piecing together what had driven him to commit such a heinous act. Arthur's responses were chilling in their simplicity. "They never cared about me," he said. This was the only way to make them listen. Detectives delved into Arthur's past, uncovering a history of neglect, resentment, and untreated mental health issues. His journals, which were discovered during a search of his room, provided a window into his tortured mind. Filled with scrawled rants and detailed plans for the massacre, the journals painted a picture of a man who felt deeply wronged by his family. Arthur believed that his mother and brother had conspired to sabotage his life, preventing him from achieving any semblance of success. The investigation also revealed the meticulous planning that had gone into the crime. Arthur had purchased his firearms weeks in advance and spent hours practicing at a local shooting range. He had even made inquiries about modifying his weapons to reduce noise, further evidence of premeditation. For investigators, it was clear that this was not a crime of passion but a calculated act of vengeance. The officers who interviewed Arthur described him as eerily composed. He showed no remorse and offered no apologies, instead framing his actions as a form of justice. "They got what they deserved," he said during one interrogation. These chilling words would later be used against him in court, solidifying the image of Arthur as a cold and calculating killer. The trial of Arthur Harrington began on October 10, 1982, drawing national attention. Prosecutors sought to portray Arthur as a calculating killer who planned the murders meticulously for weeks. The defense, however, argued that Arthur's actions were the result of severe mental illness, exacerbated by years of neglect and emotional abuse. Prosecutors presented compelling evidence. Arthur's handwritten notes, detailing his grievances and plans for the murders, were shown to the jury. His practice sessions at the shooting range were also emphasized, painting a picture of a man who had every intention of carrying out the crime. Forensic experts described the precision of the shootings, underscoring the deliberate nature of Arthur's actions. Psychiatrists testified for both sides, with the prosecution emphasizing Arthur's ability to plan and execute the crime as evidence of his sanity. Meanwhile, the defense brought forward testimony about Arthur's paranoia and delusions. One psychiatrist recounted how Arthur truly believed his family had sabotaged his life, making his actions, in his mind, an act of self-preservation. A dramatic twist came during the trial when a retrial was ordered due to a procedural error. During the second trial, more forensic evidence was presented, including details about the trajectory of bullets and Arthur's attempts to cover up his crimes. The retrial captivated the nation, as it raised questions about the criminal justice system and how it handles cases involving mental illness. As the trial came to a close, the lingering questions about Arthur Harrington's actions and motivations gripped not just Cranston but the entire nation. Could this tragedy have been prevented if someone had intervened earlier? What role did mental health neglect play in this unspeakable act? Experts debated these points for years, while the haunting details of the case refused to fade from public memory. The Harrington home on Maplewood Drive stood empty for years, its presence a stark reminder of the massacre. Local children would dare each other to approach it at night, claiming they could hear faint whispers or see lights flickering inside. Neighbors reported hearing inexplicable noises, including footsteps and the sound of doors creaking open. Some swore they saw figures moving past the windows, though the house was locked and empty. One particularly eerie detail came from a neighbor who insisted they had seen a childlike figure near the front porch holding what looked like a small, wrapped object. When investigated, nothing was found, but the story added to the mystique of the haunted property. These tales only deepened the community's unease and kept the story alive in local lore. Eventually, the house was demolished, with some residents relieved to see it gone. In its place, the Harrington Memorial Park was built. Designed to honor the victims, the park features a sculpture of a tree with interwoven branches symbolizing unity and renewal. While the physical reminders of the tragedy were erased, the emotional scars remained. The courtroom became the stage for a highly emotional and dramatic series of events that captivated the nation. Family and community members filled the gallery each day, their grief and anger palpable as they sought justice for the victims. The prosecution presented a harrowing case, portraying Arthur Harrington as a cold-blooded, calculated murderer. They emphasized how he meticulously planned the massacre, practicing at the shooting range and making inquiries about modifying his weapons. The jury sat in stunned silence as they viewed crime scene photographs, which included haunting images of the youngest victim, Emily, clutching her partially unwrapped chocolate bar. The room was heavy with emotion as this chilling detail brought many to tears. Forensic experts detailed Arthur's methodical actions, describing how he reloaded his firearms multiple times, ensuring no one was left alive. This was not the act of an uncontrollable man, the prosecutor declared. This was the act of a man fully aware of his actions and determined to carry them out. The defense countered with a starkly different narrative. They painted Arthur as a man broken by years of neglect, emotional abuse, and untreated mental illness. Psychiatrists testified about Arthur's delusions, recounting how he believed his family had sabotaged every aspect of his life. One chilling moment came when a psychiatrist read from Arthur's journals, "They think they've won, but they'll never understand what I've endured. I'll make them see." Family friends took the stand to shed light on the toxic dynamics within the Harrington household. Margaret Carson, a close friend of Beatrice, testified tearfully, Beatrice adored William and his children. But Arthur, she barely acknowledged him. He always seemed like he was carrying a heavy burden no one else could see. A dramatic moment unfolded when Arthur, during a rare outburst, interrupted the proceedings to yell, "They ruined my life. They had no right." This startling display left the courtroom in stunned silence, further emphasizing the depth of his mental instability. After days of intense deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts of first-degree murder. The announcement sent waves of relief through the courtroom, but it was accompanied by a profound sadness for the lives lost. Many attendees wept openly as the judge handed down Arthur's sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Years later, the community was shaken once more when a procedural error during the trial led to a retrial. The retrial reignited public interest, drawing national media back to Cranston and reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. During the retrial, new forensic evidence was introduced, including detailed analyses of bullet trajectories and Arthur's chilling notes. One note, never sent but discovered in his room, read, "This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth. They needed to pay." The retrial also brought to light additional testimonies. A former neighbor testified about an eerie encounter with Arthur weeks before the massacre. He said something like, "They'll all see soon enough. I thought he was just venting, but now I can't stop replaying those words in my head." Despite the defense's renewed efforts, the retrial upheld the original verdict. Arthur was again sentenced to life without parole. For many, this brought a sense of closure, though the emotional scars remained as vivid as ever. Arthur Harrington's life in prison was marked by isolation, paranoia, and an unsettling lack of remorse. While he was compliant with prison rules, his presence unnerved both inmates and staff. Fellow prisoners avoided him, often describing him as lost in his own world. Guards frequently reported hearing Arthur muttering to himself, sometimes repeating the names of his family members. Arthur's journals, which he continued to write in prison, revealed a deeply disturbed mind. In one entry, he described seeing shadows outside his cell, claiming they were the spirits of his family, watching and waiting. Another entry read, "They think they've escaped, but they're still with me. They'll never leave." Despite the eerie nature of his writings, Arthur displayed no interest in rehabilitation or reflection. Psychologists who interviewed him described him as unrepentant and consumed by delusions. Dr. Catherine Lowell, who studied his case, remarked, "Arthur Harrington is a chilling reminder of how untreated mental illness can fester and explode into violence." In 2005, Arthur passed away from natural causes at the age of 63. His death marked the end of a life steeped in tragedy and violence, but it did little to bring closure to those affected. The journals he left behind remain a haunting testament to his fractured mind, offering glimpses into a darkness few can comprehend. The aftermath of the Harrington massacre left Cranston in a state of profound mourning. The tight-knit community struggled to comprehend how such a tragedy could happen in their quiet town. In the weeks following the massacre, residents gathered at vigils, lighting candles and sharing stories about the Harrington family. The sight of hundreds of lanterns released into the night sky became a symbol of hope amidst the darkness. Local leaders quickly mobilized to provide support for those affected. Churches opened their doors for counseling sessions, while schools introduced programs to help children process their grief. One teacher, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, recalled how students in her class struggled to concentrate in the weeks following the tragedy. Many of them had been friends with the Harrington children. "We had to create a space where they could express their feelings and find some semblance of comfort." The construction of the Harrington Memorial Park became a cornerstone of the community's healing process. Built on the site of the demolished Harrington home, the park featured walking paths, gardens, and a sculpture of a tree with interwoven branches. Each branch bore the name of a Harrington family member, serving as a poignant reminder of the lives lost. Annual vigils at the park became a cherished tradition. Residents and visitors alike would gather to honor the victims, share memories, and reaffirm their commitment to fostering a compassionate community. These events also became a platform for mental health awareness, with speakers emphasizing the importance of addressing emotional struggles before they escalate into tragedy. For Cranston, the healing process was slow but steady. By coming together to confront their pain and learn from the past, the town emerged stronger and more united, determined to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. The Harrington massacre sent shockwaves far beyond Cranston, sparking national conversations about mental health, domestic violence, and the role of community intervention. Media coverage of the case emphasized the warning signs that had gone unnoticed, prompting widespread calls for reform. Lawmakers responded by pushing for increased funding for mental health programs, particularly in rural areas like Cranston. The establishment of crisis intervention teams became a priority, ensuring that individuals struggling with mental illness could receive the help they needed before it was too late. One such program, inspired by the Harrington case, focused on training first responders to identify and address mental health crises. The case also became a focal point in academic circles. Psychologists and criminologists studied Arthur Harrington's journals and behaviors, seeking to understand the interplay between mental illness, family dynamics, and acts of violence. Their findings highlighted the importance of early intervention and the need for communities to foster environments where individuals feel supported and valued. In the legal arena, the retrial and its implications spurred debates about how the justice system handles cases involving severe mental illness. Advocates called for more nuanced sentencing approaches that balance accountability with the need for treatment. The Harrington case became a cornerstone in legal education, influencing policies on mental health and criminal responsibility. Educational programs inspired by the tragedy were introduced in schools nationwide. These initiatives focused on teaching empathy, conflict resolution, and the importance of seeking help in times of distress. Teachers reported that these programs not only improved classroom dynamics but also equipped students with the tools to navigate challenges in their personal lives. The Harrington massacre serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unresolved pain and untreated mental illness. It underscores the need for communities to create safe spaces where individuals can express their struggles and seek help without fear of judgment. Cranston's response to the tragedy became a model for other towns facing similar challenges. By addressing mental health, promoting open communication, and fostering empathy, the town turned its pain into progress. Schools integrated mental health education into their curriculums, while local organizations offered workshops on conflict resolution and emotional resilience. The tragedy also highlighted the importance of early intervention. Experts emphasized that recognizing warning signs, such as withdrawal, paranoia, or sudden behavioral changes, could prevent future incidents. Campaigns to destigmatize mental illness gained momentum, encouraging individuals to seek help and support for their loved ones. The Harrington Memorial Park stands as a powerful symbol of these efforts. Its serene atmosphere invites visitors to reflect on the past while inspiring them to build a future grounded in compassion and understanding. For those who come to the park, the story of the Harrington family serves as both a sobering reminder and a call to action. As the years passed, Cranston worked tirelessly to honor the memory of the Harrington family while building a brighter future. The community's resilience in the face of such a profound tragedy became a testament to its strength and unity. The annual vigils at the Harrington Memorial Park continued to draw large crowds, including families, mental health advocates, and even visitors from other states. Each year, speakers shared stories of hope and renewal, reminding attendees of the importance of empathy and connection. Cranston's schools expanded their mental health programs, incorporating lessons on emotional well-being and conflict resolution into their curriculums. Local businesses and organizations partnered with mental health professionals to provide resources for employees and residents. These initiatives helped create a culture of understanding and support that became a defining feature of the town. The story of the Harrington family, though tragic, inspired a sense of purpose within the community. Residents took pride in their efforts to prevent similar tragedies, knowing that their work honored the memory of those lost. The Harrington massacre remains one of the darkest chapters in Cranston's history, but it also serves as a powerful lesson about the fragility of human connections and the importance of addressing mental health. It reminds us that behind closed doors, struggles often go unnoticed until it is too late. By fostering open communication and providing accessible resources, communities can create environments where individuals feel supported and valued. The story of the Harrington family underscores the urgency of this mission, serving as both a cautionary tale and a call to action. Cranston's journey toward healing is a reflection of the human capacity for growth and renewal. The town's resilience stands as a testament to the power of community and the enduring impact of compassion. While the memory of the Harrington family will never fade, their story serves as a reminder to cherish and support one another, ensuring that no one feels alone in their struggles. The Harrington Memorial Park is more than a tribute to the lives lost, it is a beacon of hope. Its presence in Cranston symbolizes the strength of a community determined to learn from its past and build a better future. Through empathy, understanding, and action, we can ensure that such tragedies become a thing of the past.